everybody. In this video, we're going to talk about how to find the interquartile range. So take 3 deep breaths and let's make this math easy. All right, so the process for calculating the interquartile range is very similar to calculating the range. The only difference is instead of subtracting the maximum and the minimum, we're going to subtract the third quartile and the first quartile. And the reason why this is useful is because sometimes the range will be a really big number, even if most of the data points are pretty close together. Because if you have an outlier, which is basically like a number that's really far away from the rest of the numbers, then that outlier will make the range really big. Because let's say, for example, if you had a whole bunch of numbers that were all in like the 40s and 50s, but then you had one number that was 100. Well, the range would be 100 minus the smallest number in the 40s, so let's say it was like 41 or something. If you did 100 minus the minimum, then that would give you a pretty big range, even though most of the numbers are in the 40s and 50s. And so the interquartile range fixes that issue of outliers because the outliers won't be the third quartile or the first quartile. So the process for calculating the interquartile range is you first find the median because you want to split your data set in half, and then you split those two halves in half to find the first and third quartiles. Then, once you find those quartiles, you subtract the first quartile from the third quartile. So, for example, if I wanted to calculate the interquartile range for this data set, the first thing I'd want to do is list out the data set in order. So I have a 0, I have a 1, I have a 2, I have a 3, I have a 5, a 6, a 7, an 8, and a 9. And so if I want to find the center of my data set, I'll just kind of connect these outer ones till I get to the middle. And it looks like the median is going to be 5. Then to find my quartiles, I'll take the lower half of my data set and find the middle of that. So in this case, I have two numbers in the middle. So my first quartile, all right, this is quartile 1, this is going to equal 1.5 because 1.5 is in the middle of 1 and 2. And then I'll do the same thing to find my third quartile. So when I find the middle of the upper half of my data set, it looks like my third quartile is going to be 7.5. And so my interquartile range is going to equal 7.5 minus 1.5, which equals 6. And that is a number that describes how spread out the middle half of the data is, because it's basically describing what the distance from the first quartile to the third quartile is. And so that's how you would calculate the interquartile range. So why don't you pause this video and calculate the interquartile range for this data set, and then restart it to see how I would solve it. Okay, so the first thing I need to do is to find my quartiles. And in order to find my quartiles, I need to find my median. So I'm going to list all of my numbers out in order. So I have 2 zeros, and I also have 2 1s. And I don't have any 2s, but I do have 2 3s. And I have a 4 and another 4. And then I have 2 5s. And 3 7s. And 2 8s. And a 9. So to find the center of my data set, I'm going to connect my outermost data points until I get to the center. It looks like my median is going to be right here in the middle at 4.5. So that's my median. Then to find my quartiles, I'll take the lower half of the data and find the center of that. So if I find the center of this data set, the number that's between 1 and 3 is 2. So my first quartile equals 2. And then for my third quartile, if I connect those, it looks like the number between 7 and 7 is just 7. So my third quartile is going to equal 7. And so that means that my interquartile range is going to equal 7 minus 2, which tells me that there's a distance of 5 units between my two quartiles. And again, this number is a measurement of the spread of my data set, because it's saying that half of my data, because I have 2/4 of my data set, are within 5 units of each other. So that's how you calculate the interquartile range. If you have any questions, let me know.